Today I'm talking to Petra Hilleberg, the CEO of Hilleberg, the Tentmaker. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
That's no problem at all. The brand, I believe, was started by your father back in 1971, your father being Bo.
Yes, Bo Hilleberg, 1971. Also, my mom was a big part of that. She came in right after. So yeah, Renata Hilleberg.
Yeah, and as you can say, your tents, I was going to say niche, but they're not niche. Your tents are high-end expedition tents for the people who need them to perform to the maximum abilities in the worst conditions.
That, yes, but also it's also geared for people that want something to last for a long time. Mm-hmm. So we have tents that are still in use that are from the early 80s. So a tent that you can pass on to your next generation. Yeah. Also, we see more now people that are just starting out that want to have something that is sustainability because it lasts a very long time. So a lot of people have this idea that it's only for expeditions, and I don't need that, but it's also that sense of safety and security of having something that's going to last no matter what you're doing. And that you can hand on to your grandchildren later on.
Yeah, I've seen that you have a labeling system for your tents so that it makes it easier for people to decide what they want. You have a blue, black, red and yellow. Is that right? Different kind of stages of what the tents are designed for.
Exactly. Yeah, so we worked a long time on that. So obviously we have quite a few models and a lot of them look a little bit similar. So we wanted to make a label system, and that's again, we used colors, so black, red, yellow, and blue, rather than expedition, trekking, etc. Because so the black label, for instance, which is our all-season tents that have the thickest poles, the most robust and most comfortable and easiest to use construction. If I have someone who's going to the North or South Pole and they're doing a big expedition like that, I will recommend them. It's pretty much standard on the poles, a Caron 4 GT, for instance, or Caron 3 GT. But if I have a family that's coming and they want to start out, they have a family, they've just started out, they want something that is comfortable, easy to use, easy to set up, and that's going to last them a long time, I will recommend them the same tent.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing that you have to keep in mind. It's not just expedition. It's more, what else is in there? Yes, it's a little bit heavier than a different category maybe, but you have the poles at the same length. So it's an easier setup on the tunnel tents, or easier. It's a little bit quicker. It's more comfort, more features, a little heavier weight, but it can stand up for anything and it can last a really long time. So that's the black label. Then the red label looks similar, also all-season tent, and they will handle pretty much all but the very worst conditions. So they're still very, very strong for all conditions, but maybe they have poles that are a little bit different length, so that you have a little bit lighter weight. There's a little bit more simplified venting system, things like that. So it's a little bit lighter, but still works for all seasons. And then we have the yellow label, which again is even lighter, and then work for everything except the most extreme, or everything except the snow. It's for the snow-free times of the year. So not winter conditions, and that's because the outer tents don't go all the way down to the ground. So you might have snow or wind coming in. They're going to be colder. But those are not necessarily entry-level tents because they are a little bit lighter, have a little bit more minimalistic design to them. So yes, they are for more of the non-winter, but a red label is probably easier to handle. So that's kind of, and it's also important to mention that we only compare within our own line, that we don't compare to anyone else. So even our yellow label fabrics are really, really strong. So we're not comparing it to something that might not be so strong. Yes. It's more within our own line of how we construct them, what materials we're using. So like for instance, the yellow label tents are our lightest tents, but we don't make them as light as they possibly could be, because they still have to meet all our other criteria of strength, longevity, durability, and comfort, right? So they could be lighter. So for instance, the poles in the yellow label tents are the same as in the red label tent. It's a 9mm DAC feather light. We tried a lighter pole that had a smaller diameter, but then we're testing it in the wind machine. The performance was so much weaker that it was not worth it. So it's always that balance. We still don't make flimsy. It's just lighter, but within our range. And then the blue label are big group tents that are more kind of specialized tents for bigger groups and things like that.
You mentioned the wind machine then. I understand you don't use a wind tunnel like some other manufacturers, but you use a wind machine outside the back of your office in Sweden.
Yeah, so we have one at the offices. We actually even have one here in my backyard. I have a wind machine sitting here. But it's what we do differently is so a lot of manufacturers will give you a wind speed rating. They say, this tent is rated to 100 whatever. And what has been done usually then is that the tent is set up and bolted into a cement floor, and then the wind machine is turned on and you clock it. So it's a steady wind coming from one direction, which is not ever a realistic view of what's going to happen when you're in the field. It's a completely arbitrary number that doesn't mean anything. So we will not give a wind speed rating because of this, because it's uninteresting to know how it's going to be when it's bolted into a cement floor. That's not what happens. So what we do, we have our wind machine, which is a remade snow cannon. So it just blows strong wind. So we turn the machine on and then we go in front of it and set it up and make sure that it can be set up. So all of our models, including the big group tents, have to be able to be, we have a philosophy that you have to be able to set each tent up by yourself in the dark, wearing gloves in a storm.
Yeah.
Because that's what matters, right? Like if you have this tent that has been clocked in a cement floor wind machine tunnel, that has a high rating, if you can't set it up, it doesn't matter, right? Then it doesn't matter. So that's what we do. So we set them up in the wind machine, and then also what we do, we have them sitting there for days on end, hours and hours on end in a storm wind to see where the wear points are. Yeah. Because that's also what's going to happen. Like where does it start wearing? So where, like every little exact distance of where the guy line positioning are, like how they are set, like what happens when the wind is, how does it happen when it's a little higher, a little bit lower. So all of that. And then also we do our office in Sweden, where we have our product development team, our product group. We are a few, like half hour from the tree border, so we can test also in the field. So we do in the wind machine, we do in the field. We also have a lab collaboration with the University of Middle Sweden, where we they have a sports tech lab that we can do lab tests on fabrics and materials and things like that. So we do all of those all together.
And I understand, unlike a lot of other people or other manufacturers, you don't manufacture in Asia. You have your own facility in Estonia.
Yes, we have our own factory in Estonia. We used to have it in Sweden. We moved it to Estonia about 28 years ago now. So, so each tent is made by one person. They put their name tags in there. So it's, so we have our factory and we have a few subcontractors in Estonia, but they only work with our tents. Our blue label tents, however, the big group tents, they are actually made by our partner at DAC, who make our poles. They have a factory in Vietnam where they make the big tents, because the big tents are really, because like I mentioned, in our factory, we make, one person makes one tent. So they have one sewing machine. So they were doing these big tents, and they're so big. So the mountain of fabric that is mounted around them when they're sewing. That it took so long, and we didn't really have the space to set them up. So then, when our long-term 35+ year partner DAC had a factory in Vietnam and just built a brand new one, we put our blue label, our big tents there, and that's been great. But our small tents are all made in our factory in Estonia, and our subcontractors there.
I mean, the Swedish heritage of the company is there to seek. All the names of the tents, they mean something, don't they? I mean, all the different names, they're translated into kind of a nice phrase. Yeah,
it's a Sami. Most of them are Sami language, so the indigenous people of the northern Sweden, Norway, Finland. It's their language, so it has maybe alone or that's kind of, or it's a mountain top or a river or something like that.
I think I've heard you say that you don't use ambassadors as such because you don't pay anybody to test your tents. It's word of mouth. It's people saying, to other kind of enthusiasts that this is a great tent. If you want to do that, go and look.
We're lucky enough to have some ambassadors, but they're not paid. So we have some people that we work with where, whenever they have a trip, we'll make sure that they have the tent that they need for that trip. But we've never paid anyone, not photographers or sponsored athletes. So, that's incredibly fortunate too, because that's not because we're trying to be cheap. It's because we want to make sure that it's people that use them because that's what they need. So we have some people that we work with who are fully paid by another brand, but for the tent, they use one of ours because that's the quality that they need. Otherwise, their trip is going to be compromised. So we just make sure that they have what they need. And then if you look in our catalog or our website, the photos are incredible. And we're just very lucky that people that are using the tents want to share them with us.
That's brilliant. Have you got anything new coming out, or is it just constant development?
So we do, we're constantly, what we spend the most time on is really developing our existing models and making them, continuously improving them, making sure that every detail on them are as they should and where they should be and as good as they can. So that's so if you look at a Charon tent from 1981, when we released the Charon, and you look at it now, they look completely different, but it's never been relaunched. It's just continuous improvements that are happening on it. And then this year we did release, so for 24, we did a revamp of the Saivo. So one of our big black label tents, the Saivo, before we only had a Saivo 2-person, 3-person, and now we have a 3 and a 4, and revamped it a little bit and made it a little better with the vestibule. And it's a really cool tent. It's giant, the Saivo 4, and it can you can sit in a hurricane in that one, and it's gonna be like shrugging at it. And then one of our most popular yellow label, the Rogan, which was a 2-person tent. We now also have a 3-person tent, which is really nice, very lightweight, very roomy then for 3, or if you want to have it as a really comfortable 2-person, which is nice. So it's still pack weight 2.5 kilos. So that's pack weight with everything that you get. So it's a very light, very roomy, nice model that we also introduced this year.
As you said earlier about one person making the tents, you're not mass producing tents. It's not like you're chucking tents at the market. You're making your growth sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. There's only because our main focus is and always has been is the quality, and making sure that the quality of each tent is at the absolute highest quality that we can, both in the design, but also then maybe more importantly in the production. there's only so much we can do because it's individually made by one person, and it takes a very long time to train a seamstress to get to that level, and it's very difficult to sew. It's difficult sewing, so they're very high skilled, and so that's kind of, we couldn't just increase it, and we don't want to. I mean, if you look at, since that started in 71, it's always been the philosophy that we have is a very slow, steady, healthy, sustainable growth, because the quality is the number one. Sometimes, unfortunately, the last few years, right, during the pandemic, when there was such incredible demand, like we had to, we had physical orders for about 2 or 3 times as much as we could produce, and we produced more than we ever had, even during the whole pandemic. But physical orders that we had to say nope, thank you. I mean, that's obviously hard, but it was physically impossible for us to meet that demand. Whereas a lot of other brands, they just went crazy and mass produced in Asia, and that kind of has destroyed the market now a little bit, because there was such an influx of just mass production of product. That's not sustainable for anyone.
Well, I think that was what happened then, was that the demand dropped off and people were left with a lot of stock that they couldn't get rid of.
Yeah, and that's kind of when you kind of jump on trends like that and just kind of go, whoa, I'm gonna make that much. And but I was really proud of our entire team, because we were probably the only ones who could produce through the whole pandemic, and we actually delivered what we promised. Not more than that, unfortunately, but that was interesting times.
It's
like with the all materials and so being so delayed from everywhere. We always keep a big material stock in order to be able to produce, so we actually could produce the whole time, which was pretty amazing.
Can you tell me anything that you're going to be bringing to the market maybe next year, or any new innovations, or is that kind of like under hush?
We're not introducing anything new for 25. I can tell you that. And what happens after that, or what we're working on, who knows, huh?
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for talking to me, Petra. That's great. It's been very interesting to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. Really nice to meet you too.